Senator Malcolm Roberts, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Mike. Good to be with you again.
The gross value of Australian agricultural production is expected to come in at a staggering $66 billion in 2021. However, farmers face many problems. What's the greatest of these?
Well, water is number one because water is a huge multiplier. You get good soil like at Colston Lakes, just inland from Bundy and Maryborough, and it just magnifies the productivity enormously, like 4 or 5, sometimes 10 times as much, Mike. So that's pure profit just by providing water. The second one is property rights and making sure that farmers are free of regulation so they can actually do their job. And the third one is access to labour, because if you've got crops planted, grown, and you can't harvest them, well, you're not going to make any money. And if you can't sow them in the first place, you can't make any money. And the fourth one is energy. We've discussed that many times. Energy is the multiplier. It's the key. But at the moment, water regulations, over-regulations, and lack of workers. And so what it means is that farmers are at the mercy of fire, flood, drought, and they need to be agile and getting their resources together in the right environment, a productive environment, so that farmers can actually make some money and give us food and fibre.
What are the cost and worst examples of regulations faced by farmers in Queensland, for example?
Well, we've discussed the stealing of farmers' property rights as a result of the compliance with the UN's Kyoto Protocol, but that's the biggest overall, and that goes beyond Queensland. But in Queensland, the biggest cost is regulations, and right now they're being savaged by this state Labor government, Mike, and over reef regulations. Now, these are supposedly based upon science, but they're not. We've exposed that in Senate inquiry of the so-called academics who are pushing this nonsense. They claim that the pesticides and also excess fertilizers are going out into the ocean and polluting the Barrier Reef. It's absolute rubbish. For a start, we under my questioning and along with Senator Gerard Rennick, we got the first time ever we've got the figure out. It's only 1.5% of the Barrier Reef that's supposedly affected, because that's the only amount of reef that is affected by that is in a reef. There have been measurements on the outer reef and middle reef. No pesticides, no trace, not even in one in a billion parts. No excess nitrogen at all, nothing at all. So it's just the 1.5% of the inner reef, and that is shown no change. So the targets for pesticides are not being exceeded. The middle and outer reefs are pristine, as I said. There have been no coral growth rates since 2005, which is 15 years of no data. So I don't know what they're basing these claims on. And so there's no need for regulations whatsoever. The other thing, Mike, is that farmers have made huge changes over the last couple of decades, but there's no sign of changes in the reef. So they've had huge impact on their farming practices, huge cost impost, but no difference on that inner reef, and certainly no touching of the outer reef. So what we've got is costs in the millions, hundreds of millions to the Queensland agricultural sector, and costs to the tens of thousands of individual family farms for no benefit. So this is what's really hurting the farmers.
Tell us about water security and what parts of the country are still struggling with insufficient water supplies, which is quite ridiculous if you think about it. We've had so much rain, and yet there's just still not enough water around in parts of the country, in particular Queensland.
Yes, I will. Perhaps if I could just add a bit more to what the farmers are facing in regulations, because, Mike, I don't know of a single farmer that puts on excess pesticides, excess nitrogen fertilizers, because they just get flushed out to sea. They don't want that. They make sure that they look after the environment, because the environment is going to determine this resale price they get for their property when they sell and retire. So they like the environment. They want to take care of the environment, and they don't want to flush excess money down the rivers and onto the reef. So it's complete nonsense. It's against the farmers that they would waste it in the first place, and there's no evidence of it. But when it comes to water, we've seen Guyra and Tamworth in northern New South Wales facing severe shortages of water. We know that Stanthorpe in southern Queensland, near the New South Wales border, ran out of water and had been carting water now by trucks for 15 months, and it's cost the Queensland government about $10 million. Fortunately, the Storm King Dam is now full again after the recent rains. But you know, that $10 million, Mike, could have been used to build 3 or 4 town weirs to hold the water that's needed to get them through the next drought. And our One Nation policy, which we'll be releasing soon for water, has a Weirs for Life, I think we called it, Weirs for Life policy, which will make sure that the height of the weirs is raised to capture 5 years worth of water supply for critical towns right throughout the bush.
What about the impact of costs to farmers? What is it?
Yeah, well, it's not just farmers, Mike. In 2000, I've got some figures here. We had in storage and dams, we had 2.78, say 2.8 megalitres per head of population. By 2030, they're expecting that to be down to 1.75, a 30% cut. So it's affecting the whole country. But what it means for farmers is that they can't plant the crops that they're wanting to plant. Some of them, for example, around Bundaberg have changed their cropping to get more high-valued crops. And now all of a sudden Paradise Dam, which was built by the Beattie government, I think, in 2005, is showing signs of potential failure. And so they've reduced the dam wall height, and therefore the capacity of the dam. So these are the challenges, because what happens is if you have water unavailable, it means you don't plant much crop. Or if you have this lower quantity of water, you change the crop. So that means you have reduced incomes the following year, and you also have a loss of confidence, psychological impact, not just on the farmers, but on the whole communities. And the Queensland government has got itself into this mess because they've driven this state broke. We have a debt now of about 130 billion dollars, and 10 billion was due to COVID last year, but the rest was due to negligence and stupidity from the Beattie government, the Bligh government, and now the Palaszczuk government. And farmers are paying the price for that.
What can be done? I mean, we hear a lot now about the problems with Bundaberg and the citrus growers, cotton growers, because there just won't be enough water. How do we fix this? I know we've got to build bigger and better dams, but short-term wise, what's the answer?
Well, we do need to build dams, but what we need to do is look at a whole productive capacity of our country, Mike. That means taxation, energy prices. These have all been artificially wrecked by federal and state governments. I mean, we can't get workers into the bush to plant crops, to harvest crops, and process crops. And so we're wanting to import people, but we can't do the backpackers at the moment because of the coronavirus. And so basically there's a lack of courage in our leadership in state and federal level. They're woke, they're afraid to build dams. We see Warragamba Dam in New South Wales, for goodness sake. It's just spilled over after Flannery and the others who said that it would never flow over again. We can't increase the size of the height of that dam wall to capture more water because we've got UN restrictions on us from the World Heritage. And so this is absolute nonsense. There's a lack of vision, a lack of cooperation between state and federal governments, a lack of governance, and frankly, the Queensland government is broke. As I said, $130 billion in debt. We can't keep going like this. And so we've got to look at the basic things that create a productive environment, a productive capacity: tax, energy, water, investment in dams.
What's the latest on the supply of workers to pick crops? It's okay, one thing to grow them, and I'm from the land myself, so I know what it's like to have an orchard full of wonderful citrus, but if not, or having grapes or cotton or whatever the crop is. But if there's no one to pick it, you're in deep doo-doos, aren't you?
Yes, and I've got some figures here in my office prepared. In February, the National Lost Crop Register, which started in December 2020, surpasses $45 million in losses at the farm gate. Queensland, it's $33 million in losses. It's affected 85,000 agricultural businesses, and it goes right across the country. There's an example from Western Australia of a watermelon farmer who lost 40% of his crop went to waste because they didn't have workers to pick. In Victoria, celery crops, $50,000 worth, were dumped because no pickers. In Queensland, we've had many vegetable crops ploughed in. A strawberry farmer in Wamuran, in our state, just north of Brisbane here, is planting only 1/3 with only 1/3 of the usual workforce. And regional towns will be affected because incomes come from next season will be reduced because of low harvest. And so what we've got is a lack of cooperation and poor governance in both state and federal. And we need solutions to bring overseas workers. The shortfall that's being faced at the moment looks like about 26,000 workers. And, you know, the government is giving money to, or offering money for people to relocate, $1,500 to assist in relocation to rural locations for Queensland residents. We've got federal government offering $3,000 for relocating to a capital city, $6,000 if you relocate to a regional area, if you're an Australian worker, $2,000 if you're a visa holder. And Mike, all we've got in the way of take-up is 500 people. We need to urgently fix the structure of our society in this country, because we need to, first of all, fix the tax system for making it easier, making it more incentive to work, making it easier to employ people. I mean, why the hell do we have payroll tax? We know that whatever you tax decreases. So why are we taxing payroll? Because that's just decreasing jobs. We also need to make sure we have a taxation system that gets foreign multinationals to pay their fair share of tax, because Australian companies can't compete against these foreigners who don't pay company tax. The whole structure of our society needs to be reconsidered and thought about from the basics upward to create a productive environment, because we've also got a welfare system that destroys the desire to actually work.
Can you paint a picture of Australian agriculture at the moment? I mean, I read somewhere the other day, someone said the Australian consumer needs to be educated in the fact that the produce that they're getting from the supermarket is not manufactured in the supermarket. There is another world out there. So there's this great divide. You know, it's almost like the COVID thing. We're all in this together. We're not in this great divide between the metropolitan areas or even the larger towns compared to smaller towns and the rural areas. This divide and this appreciation from the major metropolitan areas to what Australian agriculture really means to their economy and to their well-being, it sort of diminishes as time goes on, doesn't it?
Yes, and you're telling me that milk doesn't come from cans in the supermarket, it comes from cows?
No, it comes from cans.
Oh, does it? Oh, right.
There's a farm around Cairns, I should say that, sorry.
Right. You know, the ability to feed ourselves and clothe ourselves is fundamental. Without food, we die. So oxygen is the highest necessity. They're even trying to tax that, trying to tax the air we live in. They're trying to tax the food. They're trying to tax everything. But just the food itself is starting. We're starting to import food from overseas. We're importing food from China. We're importing food. We would be able to import rice from Vietnam, except that they're keeping it for themselves now. We used to grow so much rice in the Murray-Darling Basin, but now we import rice, and Vietnam has shut down the export to us because of the coronavirus. We import 3/4 of the seafood we eat, and yet we're in the largest continental shelf fishing zone in the world. And we have 36% of the world's marine parks here. And so we're shutting down our fishing, we're shutting down our farming, we're shutting down our rural areas, but we've got wonderful farmers. And the problem we have is that the wombats who govern us in Brisbane, in the state Labor government, and the Liberals and Nationals and the Labor Party have destroyed federal governance. We have now got people working for the government instead of the government working for people. We've now got a virus that is managing us. Somebody gets out of the health system in this state and they lock down the city of Greater Brisbane. The government is not managing the virus is managing us. We've got small farms going broke because of Murray-Darling Basin, for example, a lack of water, over-regulation, and right throughout the whole country. And so we've got wonderful farmers who take care of the environment because they know the environment increases their productivity, taking care of the environment. They know that the environment maintains the value of their farm. And so we've got farmers who look after the community, but we've got corporates coming in due to the policies of the federal government in particular, but also state government, and destroying family farms, destroying the environment, stealing the water. We've had governments that have John Howard's government separated it with Malcolm Turnbull as water minister and environment minister, separated the access of water allocations from the ownership of land. So we've had this complete mismatch. But you know what? Farmers in Australia are the best farmers in the world, and we can return to being farmers in this country, exporting more by adding water, enabling workers to work, and giving farmers the freedom from regulations so that they can get on with the job. You know, all it needs, Mike, is government with a vision, government that will take responsibility for providing a business environment that encourages investment and hard work, and restoring our productive capacity, and then getting the hell out of the way and letting farmers get on with it. That's what we need, because we've got world-class farmers who are passionate about growing food and pharma, and they are used to being respected, but at the moment they're being downtrodden. We need to free them up and let them get on with the job.
The farmer, my dad, is now retired. You have friends, a lot of friends who are farmers. They have one thing that we haven't got a whole lot of in Canberra or in major metropolitan areas. It's called common sense, and we need a lot more of that. We need to support our farmers and the industry. Senator Malcolm Roberts, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome, Mike. Thank you for having me.